and say, yeah, the university should do that and the society should do that. In a university context, I suppose the ANU Green program within a facilities management role tends to do a little bit of that. So we'll have a look at sustainability in Australian universities and the ANU Green initiatives, what we can do to try and counteract some of the consumer type activities that occur. Sustainability in Australian universities, it says on the slide, there's been significant growth in sustainability. It's a very trendy thing. Everyone really likes it. It's very popular. That's great. For many years, it was very hard to get a mention in any sort of facilities management role or program because it was just seen as greenies and tree huggers and nothing but problems. And all they did was inhibit future building and direction and growth on campus. 90% of Australian universities now have environmental management plans with their scope varies. I think it was a few years ago at an ACS conference, which was the Australasian campuses towards sustainability. There was a survey undertaken, and virtually every single university that had an environmental management plan believed that they were cutting-edge technology and leading the industry. So again, that's probably great to think that everyone really believes that they're up there at the top of the sector. The ANU is recognised as the leader in campus sustainability. We've managed to get quite a few awards. And I think that's because we've got a lot of people dedicated in the office. We've probably got, on average, if you look across the university sector, a lot more people working in the ANU Green program than we do have associated with other universities. We're extremely fortunate in being positioned at the spearhead, I suppose you could say, of Facilities and Services Division. The Facilities and Services Division is responsible for the maintenance and fabric and development of the entire campus. So being positioned within that division gives us a toehold into all the development, strategies and the contract arrangements. A lot of other universities will have an OH&S division, and what they'll do is they'll just tack environment on the end of that. So it's very hard for them to navigate back through the, I suppose you could say, the torturous sort of element of the hierarchical control that actually gets them weighted to their goals or requirements. In that, definitely growing awareness amongst the senior management. As we said before, it probably wasn't all that popular, but I think Al Gore, the media, and internationally, they say you've really got to ensure if you're going to have a campaign, you've got to time it, and it's got to be timed right to people who actually take it up. And I think now we're in that period where the time is right, where people are starting to accept the responsibility or the requirement to have environmental management plans in the sector. Why it's important? Exactly again, the higher education sector produces 1% of Australia's greenhouse emissions. So if you put all the universities together, typical universities use between 500 million and 1 billion litres of water a year. The ANU in 2006 consumed just over 750 million litres. I mean, that's a lot of water when you start to work it out. Universities, significant producers of waste, 1,000 tonnes per annum and above. We're up around about 4,500. And then when you start to look at construction and demolition waste associated with major works, capital works program, it goes above and beyond that, and it's growing every year. I think it would be fairly safe to say that the ANU probably underpins the business, the building industry in the ACT sector. We've always got at least 2 to 3 new buildings and a fairly comprehensive list of refurbishment activities, given we've got now 135 buildings on the site. We've got lots of vehicles. We do a lot of trips. Academics like to travel. Facilities managers like to go to meetings interstate. And there's a lot of issues related to our activities. When you've got a site that's incredibly diverse in the activities that we're undertaking within research schools, within the other areas, you've got a lot of chemicals, you've got a lot of potential risk. So what we're emitting into the environment, there is a lot of risk we need to deal with there. Densely populated areas, the university, 145 hectares. I think we're around about 7,500 staff and students. Technically, we qualify as a small city. I suppose that's verified by the fact that we have our own postcode of 0200, and that's just for the Australian National University. Environmental management aspects. The ANU has an environmental management plan, and there's 8 key target areas within that plan. Energy, greenhouse management, water conservation, recycling, waste management, pollution prevention, biodiversity, sustainable transport, and community awareness. So we'll quickly have a look through those and see what they mean in the context. Energy and greenhouse emissions, that's the big one. We all like to talk about CO2 equivalent emissions. That's a very sort of interesting thing. Everything seems to be related to it. I'm pretty confident that there's not a great deal of people actually understand exactly what CO2 emissions are. They just sort of accept it as being that catchphrase that's used within this little climate we're in. The university last year, with its electricity and gas, the end result of the consumption of electricity and gas was just over 100,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. So that was just from our campus alone. To try and offset that, we've got a lot of key performance indicators and targets that are all listed on the ANU's Environmental Management Plan, which is available on the ANU Green website. One of the initiatives we had was incrementally over the last 3 years have been increasing our purchase of green energy. That's green energy that has zero emissions of CO2 as a result of its production. So hydro, wind, PV, and I think biogas does come in on flaring. But we've cranked it up to 20%. We've signed off recently, only about 3 weeks ago, with AGL to increase up to 20% of green energy here on the campus. So within the ACT sector and within the higher education sector, that's definitely up there as leading edge. There's not many other areas that will have that sort of purchasing rate. A lot of them will be around 2.5 to 5%. We are driving to increase that continually as we go. The Greenhouse Challenge we report all our activities. We'd like to believe that it's fairly transparent, so what we're undertaking, what we're generating, we like to document. PSD guidelines for new buildings, we developed some a few years ago. Obviously a lot of that energy being consumed within our buildings, so we want to, where possible, come up with our environmentally sustainable design guidelines, or where possible align with the Green Star, the Green Building Council of Australia rating tool for buildings. So what we want to do is the Vice-Chancellor and the Director of Facilities and Services has stated that we'll be aiming to achieve best practice with 5-star buildings and hopefully reduce the environmental impact that comes as a result of building those new buildings. Offset emissions from the car fleet. This year we signed up with Climate Friendly to offset the emissions from the operation of the ANU's car fleet. So that's all being offset now through the purchase of RECs, which is renewable energy certificates, rather than the old system we had in place, which was through Green Fleet, which was a carbon sequestration program. Therefore, for every car the university had, we had a couple of trees being planted. But if you've been looking at the press recently, the whole carbon market, it's a bit of a buzz. You can get a carbon offset from as little as $8.80, or you can pay $40 for it. So there's a lot of questions about, if you do go for a carbon offset, are you really getting what you wanted? If you've paid for sequestration, if you really look back into those areas, you'll probably find they haven't planted any trees for the last 2 years because of the impact of the drought. They're not prepared to do so. So you may believe that you're offsetting your activity, but technically you're not. The Green Loan Fund, another one for the ANU. The VC signed off on a $3 million green loan fund. A lot of operating units are here at the ANU. When we talk to them about potential improvements, lighting upgrades or improved efficiency from heating and ventilation and cooling units, or other ideology, or the replacement of a new, more efficient boiler, there's obviously a large cost associated with it. A lot of budget areas have an operating budget and there's not a lot of surplus on the end of it. The introduction of the Green Loan Fund gives us the opportunity to actually work out the return on investment for those improvements, and that money is then allocated against it. It has a 10-year interest-free return, which virtually gives a really good chance for just about any project on efficiencies to get up and going. And the Green Office Program, I think, is one of probably the most important elements out of the whole thing. Again, going back to that, the university should do something about its CO2 emissions, and the university should be more environmentally aware. The university is simply a whole pile of buildings and structures, and it's populated by yourselves and by staff and by a lot of external public that migrate through the site. And it's every single individual that gets to make that decision on what they undertake during the day, how they undertake it, which actually really has that effect. And we can have a building that will consume X kilowatts per square metre on a theoretical design, but when people get in and start to use that building, or potentially abuse that building, the Green Office Program helps educate individuals into what the impact of their activity is and how they can actually change that. So, as we said, water conservation, 750 million litres last year. In 2006, In 2007, we've actually had a reduction. We worked out the other day, it was around about 22%, or 148 million litres. We had a reduction in consumption on the campus, which is absolutely fantastic. But you need to bear in mind that the cost, last year we also had a 41% increase in the cost of water. So that 41% increase, even though we've had a 22% decrease in our consumption, we've still got a massive financial burden associated with that increase. So we still need to have more substantial reductions in water consumption to try and help offset the cost of water. one of those big things, working towards non-potable water in the land.